So I will not amend 370, but I will amend 367 to amend 370. Well, with great respect.
The entirety of the power of the government is now vested in the
But
president.
even the government cannot change Article 1, 370. Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly can't.
You are right, absolutely. Therefore,
The executive can't go beyond that.
you are right. Therefore, the government also has no power to amend 370 by itself.
No, can't change the scheme of 370.
Sibal, under D, the president has the power to issue adaptations to the constitution, which are all these orders that we are now seeing.
The other provisions of the constitution, it says, D says that, Mullah.
Right.
Much of the other, excluding 1 and excluding 370. This is an amendment of 370 itself. How can the president exercise that power under D?
No, we are now looking at the exercise of the power to substitute 367.
Yes, but that effectively is the amendment to the constitution to 370.
Yeah, Mr. Sibal, the president has the power to amend the constitution or create exceptions by taking recourse to the power under clause D, the second proviso. The president has an unquestioned power to do it.
Yes.
When there is a government in existence, it is conditioned by the requirement of concurrence. Now, what happens when the government has been superseded under 356? I'm just using superseded in a loose expression. If the government has ceased to exist by the exercise of the power under 356, the entirety of the power of the government is now vested in the president.
But even the government cannot change Article 1, 370. Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly can't.
You are right, absolutely. Therefore,
the executive can't go beyond that.
You are right. Therefore, the government also has no power to amend 370 by itself.
No, can't change the scheme of 370. Forget about amendment.
But 370 itself postulates that it can be abrogated.
And 370 says that it can postulate to efface Article 3, then I have no answer.
No.
Then I have no answer.
Mr. Sibal, the question was slightly different. The question is slightly different. Now, under clause D to section 371,
yes,
the president, by an order, can make modifications to the provisions of the constitution as they apply to that state.
Well, please, I'm sorry to interrupt your lordship, but read the first part. Such of the other provisions of this constitution.
Correct, I'm coming to that.
Modifications can only be.
We have understood that. Just for the time being, just leave that argument apart. Because one way to interpret clause C to section 3, article 371 is that it is only saying 1 and 370 will certainly apply to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. D refers to such other provisions of the constitution shall apply in relation to the state subject to such exceptions and modifications as the president may by an order specify. For the time being, we are referring to 367 because the power under 367, there was 367(4) which was applicable even at the time of in 2019. There was clause 4 of article 367 which was certainly applicable at the time, even in 2019.
Yes.
Now, if in order to make modification to that clause,
Yes.
during when 356 is invoked, what will be the procedure?
But that's an interpretation clause. That's not a clause to amend the constitution. I mean, I don't understand, Manoj. I mean, obviously, I've gone something wrong in my understanding of the plain reading of the section, Manoj. Obviously, I'm completely wrong. But with greatest respect, Manoj, that's an interpretation clause.
Interpretation clause cannot be amended.
No, by interpretation clause, you can't amend 370. That's the power, with great respect, Manoj. You can't substitute the legislative assembly, constitute a legislative assembly. What has that got to do with interpretation? What you can't do directly, you can't do indirectly, Manoj. And where does the president get that power when it says such of the other provisions of the constitution shall apply in relation to the state subject to such that means other provisions of the constitution you can have exceptions and modifications, not exception and modification 370. So I will not amend 370, but I will amend 367 to amend 370. Well, with great respect.
In your argument on that as well, 367(4). One second. 367(4) was brought in for the first time not with the constitution but in 1954, right? So when 367(4) is brought in, if your argument is right, then the original insertion of 367(4) is also invalid.
No. That was interpretation. Well, this is Damru. That's a case directly on point where your lordships have said governor was always known to be the governor. Sadr-e Riyasat was only the name. The argument was Sadr-e Riyasat prior to 1965 had to be elected.
Right. But yes.
That's straight away. Had to be elected. But in fact, now the governor was directly appointed by the president, right? He didn't have to be elected. So merely because there's a change of nomenclature, but if you change the substance of 370, considerations would be entirely different.
That's a submission.
That's held by your lordship. So let's not. There was no fundamental alteration there. Here there's a fundamental alteration. What you can't do directly, your lordships are now saying that let's look at 367. It's hard to find an alleyway to reach a logical conclusion. One can try very hard, but as I get lost when I go to my own,
let's put it very simply.
Lost in alleyways.
Let's put it very simply. When Article 356 is in operation, how will you effectuate Clause 4 to Article 370, Clause 1, according to you?
I will, Malad. Please let me reach that stage. I've tried to answer all your questions so far, Malad. I'll answer that also.
So now we have seen the that notification of 5th of August and the original Article
370. Please remember. It says, notwithstanding anything in this constitution at the beginning, and then it says, notwithstanding anything in the foregoing provisions. 356 doesn't begin with that, with a non-obstante clause. It's important to know that even 373 says, notwithstanding the above provisions. So it's notwithstanding of notwithstanding. So then how do you exercise that power in any other way? 366 has to be subject to 370. Doesn't say notwithstanding any provision of the Constitution, I can do what I like. Well, then you go back to Malad's, what we tried to get rid of in 1950.
Now say yes. Notwithstanding.
But that's why